Joining in. Shereen, so I guess the tug of war continuing, at least for now, between the centre's proposed four-tier structure and what states are saying?
I think what's going to be important to note is what happens to that proposal of the cess if the centre is proposing a change in the centre's if states are proposing a change in the centre's proposal, then the centre's proposal was based on the cess component as well, which is why the highest slab was at 26% and then a cess. So it's going to be important to see whether there has been a change of heart and whether the cess, which would looked inevitable, is now off the table or not. But remember, this is a two-day meeting. Day one is has probably already ended or is likely to end a few minutes from now, and then we will hear from the finance minister. But you know, I want to point out, because we had a meeting with the finance minister, a bunch of us, about a week and a half ago, and the sense we got there was that there was convergence on what the centre had presented to the GST Council in the last meeting, which was at the end of October. And at that point, when the cess had been proposed, because the government's argument was that if we don't bring in a cess, then we need to hike taxes to the tune of 1.72 lakh crores. Now, at that point, the government seemed to suggest that there was convergence on that matter, and hence the rate structure of 4 tiers of 4% for bullion, 6, 12, 18 and 26 had been set. I understand the state's argument saying that, listen, VAT rate is 5, let 5%, let 6 become 5 and let 26 become 28. I know that the finance ministry was working with that option, that if push comes to shove, they will perhaps push for 26 to become 28, but there was no talk of a 40% demerit rate as well. Now, is that going to be a demerit rate, or is that going to be the rate only on cigarettes, is something that we will require clarification on from the government. But remember, this meeting continues tomorrow, and then there is another set of meetings proposed on the 9th and 10th, which is when the government hopes to finalize the draft legislation for the GST ahead of the crucial winter session, which kicks off on the 16th of November. So we are standing by to see whether a decision has finally been taken on the GST rate structure today. Also on the issue of dual control, which continues to be a sticky issue between both the centre as well as the state. That was another item on the agenda. Our sense earlier was that this meeting would have gone on till about 6 p.m., but we understand that there is a sort of Diwali get-together, so to speak, at the BJP headquarters, and perhaps that is why we've seen this meeting being moved forward. So in a short while from now, we will get some clarity from the government on what has been discussed and whether a final decision has been taken on the rate structure, Surabhi.
Well, Shereen.
Shereen.
Yes.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say it may be tempting for the government to agree to the 28% because, as Sapna was reporting earlier, even with these four rates, 6, 12, 18 and 26, and a cess added on luxury products and on sin goods, they were still working with a deficit of 43,000 crores. So 28% will probably nibble away that 43,000 crore into probably something south of 40.
No,
that may be to the government's advantage.
That was... In fact, I have to tell you that this was a question that was put forward, you know, in that meeting that we had, and it was very, very clear the government is not in favor. In fact, they said that with the Congress party's support, and they believe that the Congress party and the BJP were actually, you know, in one camp when it comes to the rates, and they believe that ideally it should, even 26 is too high, and ideally it should not be 28. But if push comes to shove, then they may have to consider that. So it wasn't as if this was something that the centre would be tempted to do. This is probably, if at all they agreed to this and if at all there is consensus on this, it is probably because their backs are against the wall.
Okay. Well, separately, what is the likelihood of the amount of you know, where the largest number of goods are likely to fall? Is it more likely to be 18%? Yeah.
No, let me just give you that calculation, Latha, and I do have the math with me. If you look at the 6%, if we assume that it's the centre's proposal, if you look at the 6% bracket, then 7% of the taxable base will fall under the 6% bracket. If you look at the 12% bracket, then 28.3% of the taxable base will fall under the 12% bracket. If you look at 18%, then about 31% of the taxable base falls under the 18% 18% bracket, and at 26%, it's about 24.8% of the taxable base that falls under the 26% bracket. So this was the calculation that the Revenue Department is working with. The total taxable base is about 51 lakh odd crores, and this is what they were working with. But there were certain issues that, for instance, the bracket which toothpaste falls under, it needs to migrate to a different band. It's currently at a higher band. It needs to migrate to a different band. Tea, for instance, needs to migrate from a higher band to a lower band. So some of these, changes within what classification or what falls under which basket was being considered. But broadly, this is the way that the math adds up. And also, while answering specific questions, that listen, why don't you just have most items come under the 18% bracket, for instance? The government's argument there was that if you move items from most items from the 26% bracket to the 18% bracket, it would amount to a revenue loss of 1 lakh crore rupees, and hence there is that hesitation, and hence it is not going to be prudent or practical or realistic to assume that a lot of the items from the 26% can move to 18%, because that would amount to a revenue loss of 1 lakh crore rupees. So that's how the math has sort of been done on part of the centre with this 4-rate structure proposal that has been put forward to the GST Council.
Okay. Well, are there very good chances of the rates coming out today itself? Sapna, of course, has been a little confident, but this is a ticklish issue, and there is a lot to squabble about. Can we be so confident that we'll get a decision in the next 5 minutes?
Again, going back to the conversations that we have been having, the sense we got was that the centre was feeling confident of being able to finalize the rates in this meeting itself. But it's never done till it's done. But yes, there was optimism and confidence, I have to say, that there would be a decision that would be taken. In fact, again, going back to the previous meeting which happened at the end of October, what we were given to understand is that more or less there was an agreement, there was convergence on most issues, and that gave the centre the confidence that perhaps as early as today, the 3rd of November, we could see a finalization as far as rates are concerned. The stickier issue there has been the issue of dual control, and that has actually emerged as the big sort of battleground between both the centre and the states. In fact, our sources tell us that more than the rates itself or even the cess, it's been the dual control issue that's been much more of a sticky issue, Latha.
No, that's a fair point. Even as recently as the previous meeting, Hasib Drabu was quite confident, the J&K Finance Minister was pretty confident that, this is not a deal breaker. He said dual control has emerged as a serious issue, but it's not a deal breaker. He was more worried about the GST rates. But as you say, things have gotten a little out of handle and become ticklish on the dual control issue. But is not the compensation the more serious issue? Will that be postponed to the 9th and 10th meeting?
I don't think so, Latha, because I think the rate structure is linked very closely to the compensation issue. Whether there is a cess, what the rates will be, is linked entirely to the compensation mechanism. So if there is a decision on the rate structure, then that means, the government has sort of kept in mind the compensation aspect of it. I don't believe that we are going to see a delinking of those two issues, because they're very, very interlinked. And I suspect, again, as we were picking up from our sources, that it wasn't just optimism. There was a degree of confidence that there is convergence on most issues, and perhaps by the end of today they will be able to finalize that. But they also have tomorrow, because remember, it is a 2-day meeting. So in case there is any pending issue that is left, that will probably be addressed tomorrow as well. But in all likelihood, we could at least see, if not finalization, at least clarity emerge on some aspects as far as the rate structure, the cess and the compensation is concerned.
Well, it is...
that's probably what...
No, I take your point. It is the heart of the GST argument, the rates, and that will perhaps answer most of the serious issues. As far as the economy, India Inc. and the markets are concerned, of course, administrative detail in terms of dual control will be more a government issue and a bureaucratic issue. It certainly affects the lay citizen, but for the markets, if the rates are known, then they will be able to manage to check out whether it would be EPS accretive or whether it would be, damaging for any specific sector. For the markets, I think all the numbers they want is the rates, and then they will be able to make their calculations about who wins and who loses from this game. And actually, to help us tackle these and other issues, we have a panel of guests also joining us. Mr. M.S. Mani, the Senior Director, Indirect Tax, Deloitte, is with us here in the Mumbai studio. In a bit, we are going to be joined by Mr. Krishan Arora, the partner at Grant Thornton India. And of course, in perhaps 5 or 10 minutes from now, we will have the Finance Minister also starting the press conference, hopefully, and announcing those crucial force structure rates and the cess that's widely being expected. Mr. Arora and Mr. Mani, thank you very much for joining us. Well, for starters, if it is a 5, 12, 18, 28 structure, which is what the states want, not that it is being yielded to, but if that happens, do you think we have cracked it?
I would say yes. If we have 5, 12, 18 and 28, compared to the way it was around 3 weeks back, the only change is there has been a reduction of 1 percentage point and an increase of 2 percentage points at the high end.
High level.
The only hope that I have is this is not compounded by cesses. If we are going to have a cess
for sin taxes, for sin goods as well as for luxury, that comes with it.
Yeah, if the cess is confined to one rate, which is common across all the sin goods, then I would say even then it is manageable. But as we have been hearing for some time now, the objective of the cess is to neutralize the tax, to ensure that the present tax outgo and the future tax outgo is kept uniform. If that has to be done, then we will be having 4, 5 or 6 types of cesses, because the tax rates on various sin products, on luxury cars for instance, on tobacco products for instance, on aerated drinks for instance, now they don't have a uniform tax structure at present. So if in future we are going to have a structure which is similar to the present structure, then we are talking of many types of cesses. That's really going to complicate things.
Aerated drinks in the sin or the luxury goods category is the one that is clearly the surprise. I couldn't believe that a product that costs anything between 15 and 35 rupees can be considered a luxury, but we'll have to really wait and see. This was mooted, it's not yet law. Krishan Arora.
Latha.
Yeah, go ahead. Shereen.
If I can just come in on that, the argument presented by the government was that things like multiple rate structure is actually needed for an economy like India, because it will help protect the weaker sections of society. Imagine if everything were to move up to 18%, what kind of impact that would have had. That was the government's argument. They also gave arguments suggesting that there are other countries that have a 3 or more rate structure, and of course on this business of a higher rate or a demerit rate on sin goods, etc., also several arguments were given on how other countries also impose additional taxes on some of these products, etc. So but again, just to pick up on the point that was being made there, the cess, if the cess does go through, then yes, you're absolutely right. It will be different for different categories and different products. So it will be, if it's 26%, then 26% minus the current tax rate. So if you say that the current tax rate on cigarettes is about 63%, then it's 26 minus 63, that becomes the cess, and it will vary as per different products. So SUVs will be different, aerated drinks will be different. But again, the argument from the government was, and again I'm reading out from my notes because I took them down very carefully, is that we don't intend to put anything extra on these products. So their argument was that we're only changing the mechanism and the structure of the taxes, but we don't want to go in for a higher incidence of taxes than what these products already currently suffer. So that seems to have been the argument. Whether or not that has changed, because when the central proposal to the GST Council was made last time around in the last meeting, there was no 40% rate. In fact, to quote a very senior government official, in his words, 26% became the de facto demerit rate.